Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much for joining us live here August 23rd. It is a beautiful Monday, and we are the Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Sean Phillips, and as always, I am joined alongside my two co-hosts, Mr. Andy Van Beber, Travis Kirkendall, and I might as well just say third co-host. Our good friend Matthew Eddleman is here joining us today. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Sean. Gentlemen, how are you all doing tonight?
Good. I just and I wanted to commemorate before we even get started. Matt already knows this, Sean, but we're going to commemorate Matt's joining us tonight. After tonight's episode, if you go to the Voice of Reason podcast YouTube page, premiering tonight at 9, it should be up online now, is the complete collection of Matthew's marriage tips compiled in a YouTube video on our YouTube channel. So after tonight's broadcast, we will send that. We always talk about that and reference that. So we would invite you to go and check that out because Matt is our most active guest. So
yeah. It'll change your marriage. That's why I'm down here in a musty basement. My wife is upstairs in bed, and my two dogs are where I would normally be sleeping. But
hey, you know what? He's an honest man. You gotta appreciate that.
Yeah. Yep.
Things are going great.
Yep. You know it.
Hey, but someone's got to do the Lord's work. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think. I think he's doing the dog's work right now. But
hey, as long as work's done on every day but Sunday. You know, right. What can you do? So, gentlemen, how was everyone's week and weekend? Did you guys do anything fun and adventurous or anything new?
I am officially past the written test for the CDL-A driving test for my bus driver's license. Now I just have to pass the pre-trip inspection test and the driving portion of my school bus test.
I thought you were about to say the drunk driving portion of it. I was like, hey, I mean, I've had some good bus drivers, and some of them were pretty questionable about where they were at on that on the line.
Yeah. Well, you know, I got to make some extra cash in this economy somehow. So,
hey, I respect the hustle, and you know, if drinking and driving is what you got to do with the kids, then you know, an old famous saying is, you know, what is drunk? Right, you know what is drunk?
Actually, Missouri, it's .004, so or it's
wow, there's the textbook definition.
I had to know it for the test, but you know, so .04. Wow. Buzz, and by the way, buzz driving is drunk driving.
That's what they say.
That depends on who you talk
to. Yeah.
Right.
What about you, boys?
How about you, Matt? Anything good happen for you this week?
Yeah, I had a good week. Went down to, there's a lake about an hour and a half from here that my wife and her family go to quite a lot. They're big, like, water skiers. And so we went down there. When I water ski, my back kills me for like 4 days. So I don't generally do that, but I get on the jet ski and do my thing there. So, you know, any day on the lake is a good day.
Nice.
What lake was it again?
Called Rough River. Called Rough River, but it is a lake.
Well, you know, that's how those Kentucky folks manage down there. Call the river a lake, and you know.
Right.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, there used to be an old magazine called Rough Riders, but I think it had a couple different things other than lakes, but things were plenty wet in those magazines. Let me tell you.
I'll have to Google that. Maybe
I recommend it. Yeah.
Do it while you're in the basement, probably, not when you're upstairs.
While I'm in my lonely basement down here by myself?
Yes.
You know, God.
Travis, how about you? Anything good happened with you this week?
Well, I just did the dishes, so that was fun.
Boy.
Just had a delicious steak, and weekend was pretty relaxed. We got our second bedroom set up for my mother-in-law who's coming here in next week.
Oh, yeah.
So excited to have her here. Pretty low-key weekend, though. And, yeah, I'll actually be out in Missouri this next weekend, so looking forward to that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And we would
staying
still
busy out here.
and we're still wanting to do that live show next time that you come to town. So
Yeah, we got to do that, but we got to figure out the location. I'm thinking.
I'm still saying
Well,
McDinger.
I don't know what
I'm still saying.
I was going to say McDingers. I
I'm
don't
still
know.
saying McDingers. Oh,
No, I think we could do better than that. What's a more conservative place to McDingers? We can do better.
Calvin's.
Is it open?
Oh yeah, yeah. Man,
Calvin's. There's JR Diamonds just down the.
JR Diamonds. Oh man, yes, JR.
And they've got those.
I think
those beautiful pecan rolls.
Oh my gosh! And so they have. I'm sure Matt was talking about. Tell us the story, Matt, where you're telling about you walked into with about your mask story.
Oh yeah, today it was Sunday. I was in a lovely town called Carrollton, Kentucky, which is halfway between Louisville and Cincinnati, and went into a Wendy's there, and there was quite a line of people waiting to order, and I was in the line. I was the only one wearing a mask. And just to my right is a table of like 6 or 8 people just out of church. You could tell they just come from church. And one lady was looking at me pretty hard. And then one of them at the table says, you know that in the Bible says that all those who've taken the vaccine are going to die within a few years. And I was like, really? And my initial thought was like, well, you're going to have your choice of some pretty sweet houses. I mean, you just wait for that housing market to hit, and you'll get that at a good deal.
Yes.
But yeah, they kind of went on, and I had not heard that particular conspiracy thing.
Oh, it's out there. There is a video that is making its circles. One of my students shared it with me yesterday. That said that everybody who is taking the vaccine will be dead within 3 years.
Sweet.
Yeah. So
Sweet. Yeah.
I am anxious to see my mother in heaven. So I mean that'll be great. So I mean.
Okay, for someone who's not very educated on everything that's in the Bible, is that actually
no
anywhere? All right, so like. How do you even how does a church preach that? Like they obviously went to there's a church out there, and sadly there's probably more than that is saying the Bible says that
you can make I want to tell you something, and Matt can back me up on this. You can make the Bible pretty much say people, and that's the problem with churches today. You can make the Bible pretty much say whatever you want it to say. You can take it's just like anything else. You can make the Constitution. You can make of mice and men. You can make any book say what you want it to say. If I take this little tiny piece of text and I can put it in there and I can stretch it, I mean, we can say, God supports this guy or God supports that guy, and you're going to go to hell for doing this, and you're going to go to hell for doing that, and you're going to, so.
Yeah. I have to quote something here real quick. Trailer Park Boys, just to throw the reference in there. It's the Bible, Julian. It's open to interpretation. For Trailer Park Boys fans, go get it. But I had to throw that in there. I'm sorry.
But it's true. I mean, I would guess that particular conspiracy is probably tied to the mark of the beast. Yeah. I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah.
Out of Revelation. And the problem with Revelation is, as Andy said, that particular book, especially, you can make to say and justify about any position you want to stand on.
And what was beautiful was our pastor, our associate pastor, 2 weeks ago gave a sermon. And the reason I love the church that we're going to is because I think our pastors sit around and they look at what our members are posting online about every conspiracy theory that they share. And then they go up there and they preach like, look, so he was like, look, this is what Revelation doesn't say, and he's like, there's nothing in there about the pandemic. Calm down, slow your roll,
Yep.
And I mean, but yet you have, that's why some people I think have problems with organized religion. So
legitimate question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, I was kind of breaking up there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people, and I've seen this for years. Maybe I don't want to go too deep down this unless you guys want to. there's a lot of people that always compare like current times to Revelations and like, oh my God, the world's ending. There's record tornadoes, record forest fires, and all that stuff. But like, if you look back in history, like think of what people thought like during World War I or World War II, and like literally the entire world's killing each other.
Yes.
Like, I feel like that narrative's been like said like years after years.
Well,
like the world's always ending.
You cannot. I will say this, and we can save this for a future show, and I would like Matt to be a part of that show too. But there are things that, and a lot of theologians can agree at too, and say, okay, here's some things that we can point to. But until specific things actually, I mean, there are specific things that have to happen. I mean, and to tell you that none of those events have, I mean, yes, we're having, you can say, well, you know, Jesus said in the end times you will know there will be earthquakes in diverse places, there will be plagues and pestilences and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. But to say the end time will come is when, you know, the Christian, and I hate to say it like this, but the Christians of the world will be gone, and then what's left is you know, who were left behind, and it's and then you have the Antichrist and the reestablishment of Jerusalem and all this other. There's a lot of stuff, and I think I've mentioned this before. America's not in the picture. America, if you look at, you know, you can look in Revelations, and they say in Revelation, and I'll defer to our resident theologian here, but they mention two regions in Revelation. It's Gog and Magog, which is basically, when you trace that back, it's basically it's Assyria and southern Russia is Gog and Magog. I believe that's, and I got one of those regions wrong, but anyway, and they're the ones who are, you know, so there's a lot of things. I mean, that is a deep, I mean, end time prophecy is kind of a hobby of mine, but it's, I taught a class, geez, it's been 15 years ago, and I read like 2 or 3 books on this, and it was just, I lost it in the move, because I actually was looking for it in the move. I had books and notebooks and everything, and probably the most involved thing I ever got into, and then I had to back away from it, because once you dive into that rabbit hole, I mean, it's just immense how much stuff's out there. So
yeah, and I think that I have a different view on Revelation and end times writing than Andy does. I see Revelation as a type of writing that a certain niche of the Jewish people did, that they just like Proverbs and Psalms is a type of writing, and the New Testament is a different type of writing. End times type apocalyptic writings, I mean, it wasn't just Christian people doing that. A lot of religions were writing end time things. And so one of the problems we get into with that is, how literal do we take it? So for me, I don't take it very literally. I take it as symbolic of larger things. There is this old Jewish saying that, you know, if I tell you a story about a man who got swallowed by a whale, right, the story may not be right, but it's true. Meaning that the larger point of the story is true. The particulars are not necessarily right. And so that's how I look at Revelations. I think where we as Western people get into trouble is, one, we wed what we're reading with American exceptionalism.
Right.
And so Andy's right. Like, America plays no role in Revelation.
And people still have people have a hard time swallowing that one too.
Right. And basically anything that didn't exist back when that was written, you cannot then put back into the literature. So, like, you know, did it predict 9/11? No, because they couldn't fathom planes. They couldn't fathom skyscrapers. And it's the same with the vaccine. So, but yeah, you can go down rabbit holes and come out in
there was a place. And Matt, you might remember this. There was a movement, and I forgot who it was. You remember the Bible code that So this came, what was that, like maybe right after we graduated, wasn't it? Somewhere in that area,
Mhm.
98, 99. So there was this guy who wrote this book that was called The Bible Code. And I didn't buy into a lot of the evangelical community didn't buy into it, but I mean it was on New York Times bestseller list. And what this guy did, he had fashioned this code from and I forgot which translation, whether it was Greek or Hebrew or what it was, but he had his formula where he calculated ever so many words, and it's like and he used it to predict. Well, I use it to predict, when Hitler rose, and when the Archduke Francis Ferdinand was assassinated, and when America entered Vietnam, and it's all here in the Bible, in this Bible code. And I mean, even your far right evangelicals are going, really, really?
Yeah, and I'll buy it for $19.99.
Yeah,
Free
yeah.
payments.
But it was
Right.
that was a big deal. And I mean,
Yes.
and the one thing that I will never tell somebody, and I mean, when I read, and Matt and we've had our conversations that we have differing theologies, but he's still one of my best friends. But we have, and that's the views that we have. And but you read the Bible. If you read the Bible for what it says, and if you're as recorded word of Jesus said, nobody knows when the time will come. And for somebody to come up and say, "Oh, it's going to happen here, 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 and here, like this, this, and this," no, it's not going to. I mean, it's going to be it'll be a surprise. So I mean, and I just for somebody to say, "Well, this is what the end of the world's going to look like," okay, because if you read Revelations, I mean, you get lost quick. And I mean, and I think it's meant and I've heard a lot of preachers say it's meant to be written that way. It's like Matt said, it's written to be that way because, they called John the Revelator, and he claimed to get this vision. He was actually in prison under the Roman Emperor Nero. He was what was the name of that island? It was Patmos. It was a prison colony that was in the Mediterranean. Well, the island's still there, but it was a prison colony in the Mediterranean he was expelled to. That's where he wrote it.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to get back on the topic sometime. That's pretty.
Yeah.
We can really go far down on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to share this news story I came across to me today. I don't know if you guys heard about this or not. But have you guys heard of the world's fastest accelerating roller coaster? You guys know where this is at? Heard about this?
No.
The Dudonapa, which is in Japan, Fuji-Q Highland Park. And this ride goes from 0 to 112 miles per hour in 1.56 seconds, making it the fastest accelerating roller coaster in the world. Operations were suspended on, so this is so this is on the 20th, whatever day the 20th was. But operations were suspended on the 20th because so many people, they made some modifications last month to where at one point during the ride, this thing gets up to, it gets over close to 120 miles an hour. And some of the turns are coming so quickly that it is actually breaking. People are having fractures as they're riding the roller coaster. So this company suspended, and it's actually been this roller coaster has been running, and I was trying to find the day when it's been running since the early 2000s. But since it was August 17th, not the 20th. August 17th is when they shut it down. But I think the fastest thing that I've ever been on, don't say it, Sean, but the fastest thing that I've ever been on was probably, I guess you could say I don't know which one's faster, the Boss or the Ninja, probably the Ninja at Six Flags. But I just can't imagine traveling at 112 miles an hour in less than 1.56 seconds. That's impressive. That's an impressive feat. It's kind of
like the people that. So I'm curious. The people that apparently got injured or whatever from the ride, like, did they have to was there a waiver signed to ride this thing, or are they liable for the people?
Well, it If they detected no serious concerns with the actual ride, then it could be the way the people were sitting. But if a person was sitting incorrectly, say with the space between their backs and their seat, it is the responsibility of the park employees to check their seating position. So apparently somebody did not. And this ride, according to statistics, this ride has had 15.5 million rides given in the time of its operation. So I mean, it's been operating for a while, but they did some tweaking to it here within the last, and it said at its peak the ride's acceleration is more than 3 times the force of gravity. That's comparable to the G-force experienced by astronauts during a rocket launch.
So how well are you strapped into this thing? Does it show riders?
Well, that's what I've looked at this on a couple of different.
I mean, is it just the simple bar across the lap and you're just hanging on for dear life?
So this isn't going to do any justice, but it looks like
Where is this
I got this from a couple. You can look at the stories on a couple of different websites. On Newsweek. The only picture I found was on Vice.com. I don't know if you can see this. It's too bright, but it looks like. It actually looks like they're sitting in these upright chairs, and there's this bar that looks like it comes up to them like this and holds them mid-chest. So, and yeah, this was.
And are there more than one people in the car? Like, are you sitting next to somebody?
There's 2. So there's 2, 4. So it's an 8-person car. It's one car. It's not all these cars hooked together. It's one car.
Oh, okay.
And it said until December, there has never been reports of broken bones in the roller coaster in the 20 years of operation up until they made these adjustments. I'm like, what adjustments do you need to make? I mean, at what point do you think we could go a little bit faster? Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what, I mean, what's the fastest vehicle you guys have ever been in? What's the fastest you've ever traveled?
The fastest vehicle I've ever been in was a Mustang, a real fancy one, and I think the driver had got us up to like 115 or 120.
I was going to say my brother.
And I was the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
My brother, I was in his Camaro, his souped-up Camaro, and we got up to 125, and we're driving down interstate, whatever that interstate that connects Montgomery to Birmingham, and we were going 125 mile an hour down the interstate, and we were just passing cars like they were just it. I was frightened. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting story of.
Well, if you think about it too, like if I'm not mistaken, the Mr. Freeze, which is the fastest roller coaster at Six Flags St. Louis, is only like 70 miles per hour. So it's a little over half.
Yeah,
that's insane.
That rides.
And that one, when you shoot out, you're
hitting. By the time you're at the end of the tunnel, you're at 70.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't ridden on that since I was probably 300 pounds, which was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Not fat guy friendly.
That story reminds me, though, when I was in college, Andy, I dated this girl named Alicia Melvin. And I was all about Alicia. Had crush on her for like 2 years before we even started dating. And we were on a date, and I was in my little 1986 Ford Escort hatchback. And I remember I turned a corner, and I guess I turned it kind of sharp and fast. As fast as an Escort would go. And she hit her head against the driver's or the passenger side window because I did this. And she got really pissed off at me and accused me of driving too fast. And then I told her it wasn't that I was driving too fast, is that she had weak neck muscles. And that really pissed her off. So I'm thinking, there's probably a lot of people with weak neck muscles going on this ride, and they should be assessed for that.
I'm literally, all I could think of is like some 15, 16-year-old kids there with like, his grandma who's like just frail. And he's like, come on, grandma, it'll be fun.
Right.
Like, we'll post it on TikTok. It'll be hilarious. And they go and then they come back and her head's gone and they're like,
well, have you seen the one that scared me the most? I will not get on those have you seen like those they have those catapult things where they basically crank you down, and then they and then they just sling you up in the air. I
Talking
saw,
about like the slingshots.
yeah. Well, there's those kinds where you drift down like that, and then there's kinds where they just crank you down to the ground, and then they
Oh, and they shoot you up.
yeah, they shoot you up.
Mm.
I watched one time with this kid who was way too small to be on this, and I mean, this kid the whole time is sliding out of the harness, and I mean,
I've seen that video.
He's got his death grip on that harness, and I'm thinking, and it's the same thing with these carnival rides. And whenever we have, and you guys have been to county fair enough times, I refuse to let my children ride or me go ride on any carny ride, because you've seen enough of those videos where those guys. First of all, you've got a guy who dropped out of high school probably when he was about 13. He's got 6 teeth in the front of his mouth, and he's the maintenance engineer for this particular ride. Yeah. And I mean, you've seen the videos of when these cars go flying off tracks and stuff like that, and we're on the tilt-a-whirl. I'm just like, that tilt of death. There's no way I'd get on one of those.
Yeah, I remember the first time I ever, like, they would either call them the chainsaw or the zippers, which essentially they were, they could fit on the back of a semi-trailer, and then they would like literally pop up, and then you're in these little boxes, and the box latches, but all they would do, and I remember very specifically, all they would do is the guy would just like stick a pin, like one of those, he would just stick a pin right in there to shut the door, and then you'd shake it, and then you'd kind of see the pin jiggle around, and then like, I mean, and we all have dumb friends, and those dumb friends want to sit there and just rock the thing like crazy back and forth. Yeah. And there's nothing holding you down. The thing that keeps you in the seat is you pressing as hard as you can against the cage. Yep. And and there's the ring of fires where you'd be in that little tiny box, and you just go up in circles and circles, but you would look and you'd see duct tape all along the top of the thing holding some of the top up there together. And
one of our former students at Clopton, you guys know Sean Yates, he sent me a Snapchat back during Pike County Fair, and he was on this ride, and the padded bar in front of him had duct tape around it, and his caption was, "Bruh." I was just but this is if you guys, so Six Flags used to have this ride, and Matt, you may have heard of it. It was called Tom's Twister. Okay. So Tom's Twister, all this thing was, so it was this giant, it looked like on the outside it looked like a barrel, and it had the whole Huck Finn theme, Tom Sawyer theme going on, and it was this big barrel. Okay. So you went inside this chamber, okay, and they had these bar slats that you got into it, you buckled this bar slat, and this belt was hooked to these bars, and they were rings that would move up and down, right? And so they would start spinning this thing. And as you started spinning, the centrifugal force, you were basically held with this belt against the wall, and your centrifugal force carried you up the side of this barrel. Now, I never witnessed this, but we had a youth group one time. I took youth to Six Flags all the time. And they came out and they wanted to vomit. I was like, what happened? They said some dude threw up in there, and the barf hung in midair while they were going. And as it slowed down, splattered everywhere.
Oh.
And I mean, I just, stuff like that. I mean, they So, and then when you go to Silver Dollar City down in Branson, those rides are fat guy friendly, because you don't really feel safe, because you're supposed to be able to get your seatbelt on, and Silver Dollar City is the only place I've ever seen this. They have these little extensions that plug in to each side, so if you're 500-pound Bubba getting into this thing, they can strap you in just to make sure that you can ride the ride, and forget the fact that it goes upside down and this way and that way. If that belt comes off, man, you're going to be having your fat butt plastered on the side of the coaster. So,
but it's kind of funny that you had mentioned the Mark Twain, Six Flag ride, because it reminded me of I'm sure some of you guys might have known that St. Louis and Missouri was actually we were at one point in the 1960s set to be the second Disney park after Disneyland in California.
No.
It was supposed to be in St. Louis.
Really?
Yes. Yes. In the mid 60s, Walt Disney, because as you guys might know, lived in Missouri.
Trent, Missouri. Trent, Missouri.
Mm-hmm. And was fascinated by Mark Twain. And wanted in St. Louis, I believe they said it was supposed to be between Old Busch Stadium and the St. Louis Arch. They were going to build this Disney riverfront that essentially was going to be an amusement park and have shops, malls, of this big travel destination. And even allegedly, and the second part, I don't know how true it is, but I've heard from locals living in Pike County that allegedly during this same time, Disney was also planning on buying plots of land between, like, north of Bowling Green, for a bigger park in Missouri, like to expand off of like the smaller park in St. Louis to kind of have this giant park up north. I don't know how true that part was, but what I do know is the one in St. Louis was for sure going to happen. But literally the day before it was supposed to be signed, a done deal, they held a big banquet to celebrate everything, to get everything like the ball rolling. And Disney did not want alcohol sold in the parks. And at the time, the old Bush heads were still at Bush, that operated Bush. And that was the industry of St. Louis. And literally apparently to Walt Disney's face, that anyone that wants to open an amusement park in St. Louis and not allow us to serve beer is a whack job. And Disney literally took it personally and took his plans and opened Disney World in Florida. So but like literally the Haunted Mansion was based off of like a St. Louis style home, and was supposed to be like the big St. Louis attraction.
Based off of Limp Mansion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We lost Travis.
I'm not sure where he went, but I always thought that was interesting. And whenever you talked about the ride at Six Flags and mentioned Tom Sawyer, it sparked that thought in my head of what could have been some of the big old almost. There's I implore you guys, if you're on Instagram, there's a really good page I follow that's called like Failed Architecture or something, and it's all these giant projects of architectural feats that were started and failed at completion. Some of them are like insane how much money these countries or cities have vested to build these gargantuan structures, and then for the project to fall apart. There's like a bunch of soccer stadiums spread throughout Europe that cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars that just sit there, and they've sat there for decades.
And we can make this crossover with this to tie into one of your Olympic stories that you were talking about. But Janine and I have been looking at, they have a lot of, we follow different pages through our social media, and we saw one. I'm sure you guys have seen these, some of these sites that have hosted Olympic Games, and what happens to these sites after the Olympics.
Absolute ghost towns.
Oh my gosh. I mean, some of them are just like, the ones that are still actively used are the ones that are in real high, like in Seoul, South Korea, they still actively use a lot of those parks. China, obviously, with all their sports that they have. But you go to countries like, I mean, you think about some of the third world places. I mean, literally third world places these games have been held, and they're already shown like some of the stuff from Rio. And Rio was what, 2016?
Yeah, that was the one I was going to ask. Isn't that the one that like is completely abandoned now or something?
Yes, yeah. And I was just like, so, and I mean, and the Russian ones. Oh my gosh! You look at some of the ones in Russia, the Russian games. I mean, they've got grass growing up through the. I mean, you look at the soccer field, and it's just like somebody used this within the last 10 years, 15 years, and you're just like, and like you said, Sean, I mean, it's probably billions of dollars in taxpayer money. I mean, it's almost like it's a one-time shot boost in the arm to get the Olympics. I mean, and I don't know if Travis, if you Chicago was in the running for some Olympics at one time, and I don't know if they're still in that running or not. But
I haven't heard anything about that.
yeah, and so I don't know. I just lost something there, fellas. Hold on a second. Sorry. I don't know.
You're good. I know
that.
Oh, go on.
I was just like, I don't know what they plan on, as far as what they're going to do with that. I mean, is it just like the one time shot in the arm for the economy, or how do they want to? I mean, what's the big time plan on that?
I that's something I've always thought, because you've got to think in these countries, in certain areas where they're not developed already, like in the United States, we usually have the infrastructure. I would honestly be surprised if like a major metropolitan area just built another giant stadium to host the Olympics in America. Maybe I'm wrong. But like when you see some of these other nations literally build these mega structures for a one-off deal that lasts a month, I want to know, like, if the Olympic Committee, tells them what kind of revenue is generated during this time. Like, I mean, naturally, right now it would be the worst time to kind of host the Olympics.
Well,
as far
that's
as
what I'm thinking.
Making money.
Japan had to have taken. I mean, they're not going to make a profit off of this. There's no way that they can make a profit off these games. So,
it is a good question, I think. I mean, I would want to know economically, is it a good deal to host the Olympics? Because you may get for 2 weeks a huge economic boost, but if your stadium sits there for 10 years and you haven't developed that into something else, or even just bulldozed it and turned it into condos or something, like, you're
right.
That is costing you money right there. You're not capitalizing on all of that.
Well, when you look at Rio, I mean, Rio, obviously, they use that new soccer stadium. I mean, that's still because soccer is God in Central and South America. But, I mean, outside of that, I mean, when they did the Winter Games in Sarajevo, I mean, when they had the Civil War there back in, I forgot what year that was, in the 90s, when they had the Civil War in Sarajevo. But it was, I mean, it's just really sad to see those kind of venues, So, But tying in with that, Sean, what was the story you were talking about, the Olympic runner? We kind of discussed it in our group chat this week.
Yeah, so we had talked about her a little while ago, an American runner, Shikari Richardson, I believe 21-year-old American sprinter, incredibly talented individual who was booted from the U.S. Olympic team after testing positive for THC in her system during drug testing phases that the U.S. Olympic Committee imposes, because the Olympics drug test their athletes from around the world. Because the big thing to remember, regardless of whether or not how you feel about marijuana, I love it, can't use it. However, the rest of the world does not feel that way. They don't have not everywhere in the world has the same sentiment that we do when it comes to marijuana usage. She got the boot, and there was this huge stir. There was this huge controversy over, why is she being left off? Would another athlete be left off? And, the answer is simple. Yes, they would have, at least here in the United States, regardless of, some of these other countries doing fishy stuff like Russia. Russia wasn't even Russia this year at the Olympics. They were like Committee of Russian Athletes or something like that, because they were banned for doping. The country of Russia was banned. So there's and I actually recently just watched a decent little short documentary about, and you guys might have seen this. I didn't know anything about it growing up, but apparently there was a really big scandal back in the day in couples figure skating between like Canadians who should have won gold and the Russian team that did win gold. And then it turned out there was like a bunch of Russian diplomats going up to these other foreign nations, like judges, and like threatening them, letting them know that like they better vote gold for the Russian. And it was like a real story that happened. But anywho, Miss Richardson, during the Olympics, because Jamaica swept, as they usually do, swept the 100, 200. They are fast. They are fast. They've always been fast. They will continue to be the fastest runners in the world. But during the Olympics that she sat home for, Miss Richardson was like tweeting some arrogant stuff like, "You miss me yet?" And was posted TikTok videos of like, "Yeah, I've been away for a while, but now I'm that bitch," and all this stuff. And well, after the Olympics, usually there's a world's event, and it starts with a P. And Travis, you might know the name of the actual event and the actual race.
I don't know that particular one. Was it? It wasn't the World Championship, was it?
Yeah,
it's
I saw I forgot what it was called, but
Diamond.
Yeah.
It's something Diamond,
Diamond League?
And
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Okay,
these
it was
are
a
all the
Diamond
same.
League. Yeah.
These are all the same runners that compete in the Olympics. But then because this was not the Olympics, Shikari Richardson was eligible, and in her race with other Americans, other nations in the top three, Jamaicans that she kept talking crap to, were the Jamaicans particular. She got 9th place, got roasted, lost by over a second by one of the Jamaicans, I do believe.
And a 100-meter and in a 100-meter dash, that is considerable. I mean, you got blown away.
Yeah, and it might not have been a full second, but it was close to a full second. It was
and sprinting like just like a tenth of a second is a difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And some people say it was a fire, and maybe it was. And I'm not gonna, I support. I hope she does better. I hope she can bounce back. But post interview, it almost seemed like she was fighting back tears, but she was just like still talking shit in this way of saying like, "I know people are talking shit about me, but it doesn't matter. I'm not done." And then the weirdest thing, and maybe it was due with times previously, but she clearly got 9th place and then was like, "I'm the 6th fastest woman on earth, and you could never take that away from me." And I'm like, "But you just got 9th in this race though, where it mattered." I'm sure she was talking about like overall records before she'd been in the top 6, but got dusted, and then didn't even participate in the 200 meter. Told her coach she wasn't even going to race in the 200 meter after saying like, "I'm not done. You're going to see me. Don't worry, I'll be back." And then just proceeded to not continue in the 200. We're seeing a lot of this with athletes, and I want to almost call it like the McGregor effect. Is I think there's we've always seen cocky athletes. We've talked about, should athletes, are they role models? Are they not role models? As one of the first things we discussed on this podcast. But in today's internet society, it's almost like I'm sure you guys remember, like growing up, there were always like the cocky kids from high school that would talk trash or talk crap, about how good they were in sports or something like that. And you're always annoyed and stuff like that. I think it's one of the worst things about the internet is now when people do that, they talk trash and then they don't back it up. They're the number one trend in the world for like 2 days in a row of just people going in on, all the shit talk, all the smack talk. And now with social media at the forefront, we're seeing, it really backfires, and it makes you think like, what kind of effect is this going to have on this girl's mental health moving forward? And running and stuff like that. She's 21 years old.
Well, and on that same line, I'm sure you guys have seen this trending too. So Usain Bolt, who is the fastest man in the world, he currently holds, what's his time? Is it 9.65? 9.58. It's a 9.58. Okay, so the week after the Olympics, and Sean will just love this. Kansas City Chiefs.
I already know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs own Tyreek Hill is challenging him to a 100-meter race. Now, in their 40 meter times, Usain Bolt's still a little bit faster, okay, but not by much. Like Travis said, but here's the thing. And right now, Tyreek Hill is considered to be the fastest man in the NFL. They have they do that by their 40 times and everything. And actually, if that was a pay-per-view event for charity, I would pay money to watch it. I would watch Usain Bolt. I would want to watch, and granted, the Chiefs are my favorite football team, but Tyreek Hill's mouth would overload his butt so bad in that situation that it wouldn't even be funny. And I'm just like, really? And I think with what you're saying, Sean, with the advent of social media, these guys have always, it's about building their rep, right? I've got to look bigger, badder, and as far as making a legacy for these guys, it's hard for them to make they don't want to make a legacy as much as they want to, try to stay in the limelight as long as they can by, saying something outrageous like Shikari Richardson says, or whatever her name was. But, I think as an athlete, you have to be humble in the fact, yeah, I know I'm good. I'm amongst the basketball players. It's like 0.001% of kids who go to, who think they're going to get a scholarship ride to college and then, I'm going to go on to the pros. No, you're not. No, you're not. So, I think some of these people just need to really, I don't know. I don't hear, and I had this topic with discussion with somebody I DJ'd a wedding with this weekend. We had the classic LeBron and Michael argument. You didn't see Michael out there talking about how the greatest of what he was. You have yet, and there may be a statement out there somewhere where he said that, but and we can apply this to the bigger picture, but I think humility is a lost art anymore. Being humble and saying, I'm not all that in a bag of chips. That was one of the things I hated as a coach because, and I'm not saying this to be braggadocious because it wasn't me. I had a lot of really great teams as I was in my basketball coaching career. Had a ton of great teams. But everybody, oh man, you did a great job with them, coach. No. The jockey is never better than the horse. The jockey directs the horse, and the horse isn't out there bragging about it. And so it's like saying, some of my favorite athletes are those who just go out and do their craft and you don't hear anything about them, one of the best rebounders of all time, Dennis Rodman. Yeah, the guy's a freak show, but you'll never hear him talk about how great of a rebounder he was or how great of this he was or that he was, but you got these guys like Sean's talking about who, I'm the great, I'm not done. Yeah, you're done. You had your 15 minutes of fame and you blew it.
And I think that's one of the hardest part about, I think there's levels to it. Like, again, with individuals like let's say LeBron James or something who, I think regardless of the Michael Jordan, LeBron James argument, regardless, no one can argue LeBron James is one of the greatest players of all time.
Sure.
At least in the top two.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But he holds himself on that pedestal of I am the best in the world, and has done so for quite a while and is very vocal about doing it. And it makes you think guys like Kawhi Leonard, when they were playing the best in the league at the time, who weren't loud about it. I just think there's levels to it of when LeBron gets torn down, he gets torn down by people when they don't go out and win a championship. Mm-hmm. Whereas some of these other players that, are insane, Takempo is like he's a quiet individual for the most part. And like again, like guys like Conor McGregor, it's so much fun to make fun of him when he loses because he's
a big mouth.
There's so much build to when it finally happens, and so but I think the difference is those guys have been on top. They've had a place to fall, whereas this was an individual that was acting like they were at the top, and they hadn't even barely started the climb. And so it's just like you hate to see that kind of crash and burn because the internet is unforgiving.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see, like, hopefully we see this girl again in 4 years. Hopefully this doesn't mess up her mental health. And hopefully, like, in 4 years, the internet will kind of forgive and forget. I know Jamaica won't, because if anyone's going in on this girl hard, it is Jamaican Twitter. It's rather amusing.
Don't you think, and I'll open this up to Travis and Matt, don't you think that this is something that's, and Matt, or Sean kind of alluded to this, isn't this something that you guys think is conducive to our society right now, that people have to, in every one of our professions, I bet you every one of us can name somebody, well, we're not going to, but we could name somebody at our workplace who wants to toot their own horn, who wants to say, I'm the guy, come to me, look at me, and they make the noise. I mean, what do you think that's all about?
So I feel like, and maybe I'm just a little cynical on this, but I feel like with Shikari Richardson and even some MMA fighters who are kind of lesser known, the point of their big talk is to get attention, and attention draws followers on social media, and that draws money and opportunity. And if I'm a track star and I know there's no big payday for me as a track star. I'm going to be in the limelight for 15 minutes here at the Olympics, and then I'm largely going to waller in obscurity until the Olympics come around again. And probably, even if I'm the best of the best, probably the best long-term thing I can do is become a track coach at a major university or something like that, or maybe go on a motivational speaking tour or something like that. So, I wonder, in her mind and others, does it even really matter where they place? If they can keep saying things, bombastic things, and draw attention to them, and their followers on Instagram and what have you keep going up and up and up, money comes in. I was just listening to an MMA podcast yesterday, and they were talking about Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor, and how I believe, and I might get this wrong, but Dustin is next up to fight the champion, right? But they're talking about
but I don't know if he's going to. I think he's chasing money fights.
But how he may fight someone else, whether it's Conor again or another person who's a big name, because that big name will draw in much more money than if he were to fight the champion and win.
He was calling out Nate Diaz.
That's right.
Because of what he did to Conor in their first fight, like literally put himself on a pedestal, and his older brother Nick, also a superstar in his own right. But yeah, definitely, like, the champion now is Charles Oliveira, a Brazilian who's not, essentially the most marketable champion at that, whereas Nate Diaz, or even running it back with Conor for the fourth time, is double the payday.
So I just wonder, some of these athletes have a very short window to make their money, and rather than gruel it out in obscurity, if they can say bombastic things or inflammatory things and get a money stream going in from some other place, that could be a strong motivation.
And Travis and I were talking about this recently, how in combat sports anymore now, I hate saying, because I love boxing, I love mixed martial arts, I love the competition of it, but we're seeing that people don't care about championships. You're right. It's a short window. People care about cash. That's why this Sunday night, Tyron Woodley, a former UFC welterweight champion who successfully defended his belt multiple times, is fighting YouTuber / boxer Jake Paul. And it is going to be like Jake Paul, a entertainer YouTuber, regardless of how you feel about him, is in like the top 6 of boxing pay-per-views of all time in his second fight. And so this fight will probably do even more. Because this time he might have a real shot at being knocked out, which people want to see, and he knows it. And even if he gets his head blasted off of his body, he's still going to walk away with a lot of cash. But look at, Travis could tell you, look how hard it is for boxing champions to fight boxing champions. Look how
so
long
hard.
Those days are gone where you could say that, in my day, when there were so many big names that came along and held their name, other than your Mike Tysons, your Lennox Lewises, your Floyd Mayweathers, your Evander Holyfields, Manny Pacquiao, those guys held names for a long time because they were actually, I think we're in this generation of so many flash in the pans, and Sean and I have had this debate many times, but I'm already starting to see it. They made such a big deal about, Patrick Mahomes, and I love Patrick Mahomes, but what was the contract? It was $500 million, $500 million.
10 years, $500 million.
Okay, and the most expensively paid athlete in all of professional sports. Okay, to me, to say, okay, and I'm sorry, again, diehard Chiefs fan, but nobody's worth $500 million. If you were out there showing a talent, I don't think you're. If we would pay people what they were worth to their value to society, if I was to say, and to my own horn, teachers, firefighters, case workers for abused children, stuff like that. These are the people who should be getting paid, and you got athletes who are going out there who are making multi-millions of dollars, and even if they shove their foot in their mouth and they go away, they're still going to get paid for their contract. And
that's like, it's interesting you bring that up with, so, when it comes to some of those jobs, caseworkers, teachers, firefighters, taxpayers pay that salary, right? Most cities foot the bill for these football stadiums,
and that's a joke too. That's a joke.
Built. Yeah. I would disagree in the sentiment that, if Kansas City wants to pay Mahomes $500 million, go ahead and pay the man $500 million. What is a true statistic, and I looked this up after this deal specifically went down, no quarterback, the highest quarterback was actually Peyton Manning when he took the Broncos to the Super Bowl. His cap hit was like 21.8%. That is the highest cap hit a quarterback has in teams that win Super Bowls. The average is the quarterback makes up anywhere in the ballpark between 15 to 18% of the salary cap. Patrick Mahomes just put himself in a position where for the next 10 years, he's going to be taken up anywhere between 28 at one point. I think the highest I saw was like 39% of the cap that the team has. Now, mind you, that cap's probably going to fluctuate. But in the same token, for someone that, loves Kansas City, wants to put all the Whataburgers here, wants to own the Royals, who's another poverty franchise. He's also an owner of the Kansas City. What is it? Their soccer, Sporting KC. Yep, Sporting KC. Yeah, definitely a very smart individual. But the sentiment that he wants to win in Kansas City, you just took your best opportunity to the bank with you. So.
Well, and I think that a lot of these states that don't have professional sports, In particular, I mean, I look at, Kentucky, Kentucky does not have a professional sports team per se, but I mean, you,
Correct.
you guys got the Cincinnati Bengals, which is right there on your northeast border there, and maybe even you could probably even say the Cleveland Browns even too. But I mean, don't you think as an overall, I mean, do you think states like that are missing out on not having that kind of? I mean, I'm gonna get back to what Sean was saying about taxpayer. I mean, do states miss out? Do you think states miss out on that, or is it just something that it's not even worth discussing?
Miss out on that. What do you mean?
Well, it's like I think that some people think that go back to so I'll go back to Patrick Mahomes. Okay,
Hmm.
Patrick Mahomes is going to fill seats for a very long time in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Travis, and here's the other thing: anything that Patrick Mahomes is going to put his name on now, so the Kansas City, Sporting Kansas City, the Royals, anything that he puts his, I mean, and he brings that to the local economy. Yes,
Mm.
you know, do you think some other markets miss out on that? Even I'll use Travis for example. The Chicago Cubs suck, but yet I guarantee you, tomorrow's game, you go down to Wrigley, and there won't be an empty seat in that place. The Cardinals are so far out of first place in St. Louis, but I guarantee you go to their game, they're on a weekend. There's probably not going to be an empty. These are markets that generate so much revenue, and you think about I mean, Las Vegas finally got the memo. Las Vegas is bringing in the Raiders and the Golden Knights, and they're doing all this stuff to bring in. There's talk of bringing an NBA team to Las Vegas because it generates revenue. Do you think that that's something that other states miss out on, or is it just a diversionary tactic that can be a drain on taxpayers?
No, I think it is something that, I mean, if you were to talk about economic equality and trying to spread the wealth, it would be something to look at. I hear, having lived in Louisville now for 6 years, every few years there's whispers of, well, Louisville could get an NBA team because Kentucky is a basketball-centered state. They love the Kentucky Wildcats and John Calipari, and then we had Rick Pitino in Louisville until just recently, a few years ago. So the talk tends to revolve around, will Louisville ever get an NBA team? And then the question is, well, can you support an NBA team? I think we could. I think that the revenue it would bring in, if you could find a way to spread that around the state, would be good, because 10 of the top 25 poorest counties in the United States are in Kentucky.
Wow.
Usually on the eastern side of Kentucky, mainly. But if you could have something like that where you make a deal where some of that money goes towards like social services programs or,
yeah, and
awesome.
Right, and that's the thing too. If you look at the NFL, I mean, is ungodly wealthy, and their owners are ungodly wealthy. But I will say, in their effort to do stuff like YMCA, Boys Town, Girls Town, and you get some of these guys who are top shelf athletes who, I mean, Albert Pujols hasn't been in St. Louis for 12 years, and yet the Albert Pujols Foundation to help out kids with mental handicaps is still based out of St. Louis. I mean,
well, remember whenever he was cut from the Angels, like there were billboards went up in St. Louis, like begging the team to bring him back.
Yeah,
a decade later,
Yeah. But I mean, it's stuff like that. But that can think about how much that brings to the community. I mean, and I think especially in times like these, sports serve a purpose. People say, "Well, I don't like sports, or I'm not this." We could have differences on opinions on certain stuff, but you bring people together for a sporting event. It's like or a concert event. I think that's one thing that's really drawn division during these times of COVID and political, because when you don't have events that can bring people together and just say, man, I'm a this fan or I'm a that fan, and we can put our differences aside and we can cheer for our team. And I mean, sports to me is a underlying. It can be a salve that can really mend a lot of wounds. That I think, and I think it's very important to allow these venues to start getting back to at least 65 to 85% of their capacity in these, because right now these towns, our country needs this kind of stuff to bring us together.
Well, look at sports throughout history. We've always had them. They built coliseums, before electricity. We literally can't fathom how they did it. That's the impact sports has. It's always like I always will fight back, and it's gonna be a conversation for a later day because we're getting close on time. But a thing that people always argue is like sports aren't political. It's sports. Sports have always been political. They've always been in the forefront of politics throughout history. Now we just have social media to go on about it.
Roman senators always called the gladiator games, they called it bread and circus, because politicians, whenever they needed to draw heat off themselves, would have 100 and some odd days of games, and during the games, the Caesars would let the people know they would throw out bread during the loaves of bread to the. I mean, you could get into the games for free, but they would throw out bread and stuff to the crowd just to appease the crowd. And your Caesar has provided this for you. So yeah, politics have definitely been a part of sports for a long time.
Oh yeah. Well, I definitely this was a fun one. We had made the point to try to steer clear of talking about things like COVID or Afghanistan, just because like my meat, it's beat every single day to the pulpit, and we don't necessarily want that. So we wanted to kind of like chat and kind of have a loose fit episode, but it was always awesome chatting with you guys. And Matt, Andy, Travis, you guys have anything going on?
I mean, because we wanted to be loose, that's why we invited Matt, because we know that Matt is loose. So, yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. Are we still talking topics and podcasts or something else? That's
no, but we would invite everybody, and we'll post it. I'll post a link onto the Facebook page. Please share it, and I hope, Matt, that you enjoy it. You'll need to text me later and tell me if you enjoyed it. But please go to our YouTube page. You will see it under Matthew's marriage tips, and please enjoy it. Share it with friends. Make this guy famous, guys. I want to make Matt Eddleman famous.
Hey, spread the message.
They'll get there, and then they'll cancel him shortly afterwards.
Immediately. Exactly.
You can't cancel the Lord's work.
That's right. Live. It's on.
There you go.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it once more.
Yeah, well, we'll give it about another month and let us get our listenership back, and then we'll have you back on again.
Like a good strategy.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, as always, thank you guys so much. For our listeners, again, yes, thank you all so much for listening to us. Please check out Matt's video on our YouTube channel after this, the Voice of Reason podcast. Make sure you check us out on all your podcast platforms that you use, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcast, Podbean, right here on YouTube, Facebook Live. Please feel free to share, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and have a great week going forward. Andy, Travis, Matt, is there anything you'd like to say to everyone as we head out tonight?
Good night, guys. Have a good week.
Thanks for listening to that.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. This has been the Voice of Reason podcast, and we will talk to you guys next week.